Okay, at this time we will head on to our next session. At this time I will introduce Brant Reif.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to ask you actually to just go on to the itinerary for today, and if you click on the presentation, that'll just give you access to the Google Slides presentation that I'm going to use. I've put a bunch of the hyperlinks into there so that you can just click on those and go through that. So if you click on this link to presentation, then this should open up for you. And then, if you just follow along with this, most of what I'm going to be presenting on today is built into this. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I taught bio for the first several years I was at Valley. I'm a high school teacher, so I recognized when that question came up earlier that most of the people in here are middle school, but a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about is pretty universal for whatever you're teaching. But so, bio for a while. Plant science at Valley High School is geared to more our at-risk population. My thought is if a kid is going to get a science credit at our high school, that is the first place where they're going to pick it up. And so I've really changed that curriculum over the years to try and benefit those kids that have gone through that period where they've checked out of math and science. They've been told they're not good at this, and to try and give them buy-in on that. And then I've been teaching the AP Environmental Science curriculum for I think this is my 4th or 5th year. And so the stuff that I use is in both of those classes. So it meets the needs of the at-risk population. It meets the needs of my high flyers in the AP curriculum. But the background behind the stuff I'm going to be sharing today came out of the AP Environmental Science, where I taught it for a couple years, just trying to get the foundation underneath me, and then I felt it was kind of problematic to print out all this paper for the students in a class where we're learning about resource conservation and how do we keep some of our resources so the next generation can use that. So one of my big goals was to try and go paperless. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is the result of that journey. And what was neat listening to Craig's presentation is that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is similar, it seems, in his pathway, but here I'll be sharing a different platform. So that's kind of why I use what I do. It was an attempt to go paperless, and I'll just share the platform that I'm going to be kind of using. One of the things that I'm going to share with you is a way to focus on this collaboration part of the TIC. Raise your hand if you use today's meet. A social studies teacher in our building shared this with me last year, and I love it. So what I would like everybody to do is to just click on that hyperlink. If you're not on the agenda, you can just type that in. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to be having you respond to stuff. So I'll just share what that looks like right now. I've already posted my first question. With students, this is a very effective way for me to have almost the entire class engaged. In some cases, it definitely is everybody. But when you go to this, the nice thing, and I'll share the pros and cons at the end, but with this one, you don't need to log in. You don't need to set up an account. You create the URL, so I already just set it up. What you guys will need to do is to create a nickname, and then I would like you to just answer that question, type into that. At the end of today's session, I'll be able to print out a transcript of this. I'll just save it as a PDF and then share it with Rob, and he can email you the copy of this. And so my goal is to have each one of you trying to think about how you might use some of the technology pieces I'm going to share, and then maybe you'll be able to read some other ideas, and that might help you in your class. And so spend some time just thinking about this, and then I'll move on. And as you can imagine, if you are the instructor and this is just popping up in front of you as you are teaching, it is a really powerful way to kind of teach on the go, to address some of the questions that the students have that they may be uncomfortable sharing orally in front of their peers, but they're really comfortable just typing it out there. All right, so I'm just going to let that continue to run, and I'm going to come back to that. But let me start with this, because this was actually an unintended consequence of my use of technology, and Craig mentioned this as well, was as I started to use this stuff, I realized, not right up front, but how many fewer excuses I started hearing from students for why they didn't have the paper, or why they didn't get their homework done on time. The other part is that cheating, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to Google Docs. But these are both things that, this was not my goal of technology, but I have recognized I'm just not hearing those as many excuses as I used to. And if that is a piece that you might appreciate, use it. And so I'm going to ask you in a little bit to share some of yours, but let me just start off with this. The AAA, or not the AA, the NEA compiled this a couple years ago. And just one of those things that we all have, some of those classic stories where you're sitting, as I was yesterday, in the lunchroom as we're wrapping up first semester, and the students are coming up at the end of the semester and telling you why they didn't show up for your final and what their excuse was. And so so I just thought I'd start off with this, just some of those excuses. And it's not just the lack of homework. It's, as I said, you didn't show up for your final. Well, why was that? You haven't been in school for the past 2 weeks, and now you want to turn all this stuff in. Sometimes I wonder if this is what we're going to remember at the end of our careers. It's not all those specifics. It's just those stories. I graduated high school in West Virginia, and the first day of the hunting season, most of my peers were not in school. So that's what I was thinking of when I saw that Bass Pro Shop one. So this is the next use of today's meeting, just to lighten the load a little bit. for any of you that have had some excellent excuses this year, or just in the past. What I use with today's meet is I will type in all caps so the students can identify where my comments are. So if anybody has any fun stories from this year or in the past, I'd love to hear some of these. All right, so as I said, this is one of my favorite pieces of the technology piece that was not intended. And I'll get to some specifics on how this works, but with the technology that I use, there's a timestamp, and they have a deadline. And if they're absent, I don't have to deal with the multiple days to get it made up. They know that that's when it was due. And the way that you can communicate the assignment is such that even if they're gone and they know your expectations, they're aware of where to go to check. And if they don't do it, it's not really an excuse anymore. They don't need to be in the classroom to see it. They don't need to show up and slide it under your door. And whenever you see that timestamp, you know whether it is late or not. The one downside is, yeah, they're going to need the internet connection, but our high school is flexible enough that we have multiple computer labs. Students have multiple opportunities if they don't have this access at home to work on it at school. And then the number of kids that ends up being is small enough that I can work with them individually and, okay, you need to come to resource, you need to go to the media center during your study hall to get this specific thing done, save the paper stuff for home. The next technology piece that I'm going to talk about is Google Docs. And this was something that I started using when I first went paperless. And then I'm going to build in how Google Classroom, another management system, integrates really easily with this. So let me start off with this. I'm just going to show you one way that I use this to gather information on the go, and I can use it as a summative. So I want you to click on that link, and it'll take you to a Google form, and I want you to respond to that. If you're not following along with the presentation, you can just type out that URL. But if you just go to the slide that I shared with you, you can just click on the links. And this is a concept that comes up in my AP Environmental Science class. It is a nice question in that there is no right or wrong answer, and will help some of the students recognize how when we're trying to deal with environmental problems, you really have to understand the variety of perspectives that people have. I also point out that I have extreme bias in the instruction of environmental science. I care deeply about it. So you have to sift through my bias as I teach you about the environment. But you also don't want a teacher who doesn't care about their subject that is teaching that. So there's the form, and then because I have created this, I can go in when they're done and very quickly get representation of how they are responding. Now, in this case, I could use this at the beginning of a unit where I'm just trying to figure out where do people stand on this issue. Tomorrow when I show up in class, I'm going to be lecturing about fossil fuels. Next week, I'm getting into some of the renewables before I get into the new renewables. And so it's a fun type of activity to just try and figure out where students are at with respect to the different use of the fossil fuels or the energy type, and then we're going to move into what should the U.S. policy be with respect to these different energy sources. I can also use this as a summative assessment. Similar to the plugins that Craig was mentioning, you can use some of those with Google Forms. I use this one called Flubberoo or Flubaroo, where I can give a vocab quiz and I can grade it and send them feedback on that. So this is one example of how I'll use Google Forms to get an idea of where my students are at. And then a couple other examples, and the other two examples really get into the collaboration piece. And I just wanted to share, you're not going to have access to these, but here's two examples of data that I use in my class. In the AP Environmental Science, we will go out to Walnut Creek along the Clive Greenbelt. We will do water quality monitoring, both chemical and biological. And to get them ready for that, I run some simulations in the class where I have set up 3 or 4 different beakers with different types of water. I know what they should be finding, but as they collect their data, then they go into this spreadsheet and add their data point. And I'm trying to move beyond science. Science is the thing where there's a massive amount of data that you need to gather to back up and support your hypothesis, but we don't always have the luxury to do that. And I think a lot of science is done where the students are running the lab, they're getting their data point and trying to make conclusions about the entire lab based on that one data point. And so my students have to analyze the entire data set from all 3 sections. And so each student has editing privileges of this. They go in and put their data point in, but when they end up analyzing the lab and doing their lab write-up, they have to analyze the entire data set. And this is where they can see the strength of, yeah, that number is really an outlier. If that was my data point and I was analyzing the water quality on this, I would say that it's really poor. But when you look at what the other students were gathering from the exact same body of water, then yeah, maybe that's not the likely value. So they were measuring hardness, they were measuring nitrates, phosphates, pH, and dissolved oxygen. Another example of a lab that I do with this is soil analysis. We go out to Brown's Woods in our ecology unit and we look at habitat niche of 3 species of trees. And then in our next unit, when we get into geology and soil, they go in and they analyze the soil in some of the same quadrats to see if there is a connection between the distribution patterns they found with the tree species and what the soil chemistry is. There's different habitats. One of the groups went to a retention basin catching this runoff. Another one went to collect soil on the slope, and the other at high elevation. They pick which of the different tests they want to run. I just make sure that all the tests are being done. So here was my soil type. Soil type we did in the lab, so that's why this is blank. But when they analyze the soil type based on the chemical separation, what they found, and how that matches the qualitative data that they predicted based on feeling the soil and trying to make a ribbon to get an indicator of the clay content versus the sand content. And then the group that did the slope, they're down there, and the group that did high elevation. And then again, instead of them just concluding the lab based on the one data point, every student has access to this entire data set. Again, just trying to drive the point that science is not about going and doing one test and then reaching conclusions based on that, that you have to be able to replicate these results. You have to gather a tremendous amount of data. So those are the main things. There's some other ones. I just wanted to share the spreadsheets because it ties into that collaboration. But these are what I have found to be the benefits, the advantages of Google Docs. Web-based, so I don't have to deal with that complaint anymore of, well, I have a Mac at home, I can't do this. So web-based, it allows for collaboration, as I just shared with you with that data set. You collect your data, and then you just put it into that spreadsheet. So the data sharing and processing, I can review the revision history. This has been very beneficial when stuff has happened, and I have been doubtful of whose work it really was. One time I had a nasty comment pop up in a data sheet, and I was able to find out exactly who said that and when. Saves automatically. I don't have to worry about the student telling me that their whole computer blew up, and that's why they don't have it. And then they can share without printing, which, as I said, was my original motivation in this, was how do I go paperless in this environmental science? Some of the disadvantages, Not as many features as the Microsoft Office Suite, but I feel like every year when I go back into Google Docs, there's more and more features that they're using. And again, it does require internet access. So for some of my at-risk kids they don't have any of this at home, I just have to work with them on where during the day can you come in and get this stuff completed. So that's my little spiel about Google Docs. And let's go back to today's meet. So what I'd like you to do within your table groups, just share how you think you might be able to use this, share how you are already using this, and then for some of you, I would appreciate posting to this so the whole class, this whole TIC session could benefit from this. So share orally first. I want you to talk about what you might be able to use this for, how you're already using it, and then my hope is that with any of these, we can just build on the successes of each other.
Work on Google Docs offline.
Yeah, for some of the stuff, especially with the Google Classroom, because that's where I'm getting. All right, I'm going to keep going. The main platform that I use is Google Classroom. So Google Classroom was new last year. I had been running a bunch of different Google apps to try and manage my classroom. This is just another learning management system. Craig presented Moodle. This is the one that I happen to use, and it was mainly because I was using all these Google apps for educators, and then Google released this, and I realized, yeah, this kind of solves most of what I was doing anyway.
This is a question I've had for all our tech people, and no one's been able to answer it, so I'm just curious. We did a PD on Google Classroom last year, and I was told to enter it as a student, and to this day, Google will not let me become a teacher and have my own classroom unless I delete my school account and lose everything that I've ever made on Drive and do that. Do you have you found a way to do that?
I have no clue. This is one of the things I was thinking about as I was coming to present on this. You know, I'm just learning these things kind of on the go, and so I was trying to think of what questions might come up today that I would have to research because I don't know, and that's one that I haven't heard.
Even if a Google administrator left the school district?
You're a new one. Whoever is the Google administrator will be able to.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks. So here is one of the things, from the student's perspective, this is one of the things I love about Google Classroom, and this is how I am trying to get other teachers to buy in. This is the first thing that I will share with teachers. It's the first thing I share with parents on open house. This is why I use Google Classroom, because it's going to get easier, especially at the high school. I know middle school teachers are using it in our district. I know teachers at Southwoods, and so by the time I get them in the next couple of years, they know how to use this stuff. Last year was a little bit rockier, but this is what one student of mine last semester, when she logs into Google Classroom, this is what she sees. It is her planner, essentially. Here are the classes that she's taking. Here is what is due today. Here is what is due upcoming. And this is the main thing that I share with parents. If teachers are using this, you don't need to email me the upcoming assignments. It's right there. If this is in your IEP or 504 that you need to manage all of that stuff and communicate with teachers, and I have to communicate with the caseworker for that special ed student, they just go into Google Classroom and can see all this stuff. So this is one student, this is another. That is a huge benefit of this. Again, that this is not why I was using it, but I really appreciate it because of this. The other things, for those of you that are using Google Classroom, you're pretty familiar with, but you can post announcements. Students today in my AP class is a preview for the fossil fuel lecture tomorrow, are reading about fracking right now, are reading about oil prices and OPEC and what's going on with that. They're reading about pipelines and then responding in Google Classroom. And so I was just looking earlier today because one of the classes was taking place, and I could see as they were typing into these documents what was going on in my classroom 20 minutes from here. And so it's a powerful delivery method for the technology, but also a way for me to manage, to post announcements, to post assignments. And the students that have all of this stuff that pings in on their phones automatically, they know exactly what's going on. Advantages, excellent organizer. Students cannot lose work. I've even had students that have tried to delete things, and I've been able to go in. They have a classroom folder and find it as a way for them not to get out of doing the work. This is a huge thing for my at-risk population. The students that, if they have a paper document, won't turn it in unless it's complete. And I know at the end of the semester, that can be the difference between them failing and passing the class. The day it's due, I will grade whatever you have worked on, whether you submitted it or not, because I know that's going to get you through to the next class. Again, I can view the editing history. This came up just this year where a student requested access to a document that I had created. They don't know that when they're trying to share it with each other that I own it, so it has to come to me, and it's a really easy way to address that issue with them. And then for students that are absent, with that at-risk population, that is a big thing. It allows them to stay on track with the curriculum without having to come in and check in with me. Some of the disadvantages, you do need a Google Apps for Education account, and your Google administrator can just create that. There is no cost. And one of the things that we're talking about in our building is, as more teachers are doing this, does this encourage students to just miss school because they know they can do it at home? Everybody has a different stance on that, but if they're doing the work, how much does that matter? And in some cases, I just need them to pass. Based on my time, I think I do want to do this because I know some of you are using this. So let's go back into today's meet. And those of you that are using this, those of you that aren't, just your thoughts on this. How might your class benefit from what is available in Google Classroom? Again, those of you that are using it, I would really like you to post some of your successes with this, what you like about it, for those of you that aren't using this. Again, just a different learning management system. One of the other ones that I have used because of trying to go paperless is Turnitin.com. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. In general, I started using this because the lab write-ups that I would have my students do were not something the students were going to be able to find from other teachers. It wasn't a canned lab that I was developing. But after teaching it for a couple of years and having siblings and having friends, I recognized there might be that temptation for some students to just resubmit a lab from their sibling or from another student. And that is why I started using Turnitin.com. Our district already had an account for this, so that wasn't something I had to set up. But the beauty is that Turnitin.com checks against other assignments that have been uploaded. That was the main reason for using this. The other reasons that I use it, comments provided, and you can make your own, so that if you know, especially in some of the science labs, that you just have to make the same comment over and over again, well, I just type that out and I can just click that every time that pops up. I can see which students have viewed comments. This was one of the most eye-opening things for me. The first 3 labs I do in my AP class, I tell them I am just grading you based on your attempt on these components. I am not grading you on the quality, but I will give you feedback. And on the 4th lab, if you don't take that feedback into consideration, then I will deduct points. When you go into Turnitin.com, it tells you which students have viewed the comments. And the first year I taught this, in a section of 24, 4 of my students had viewed the comments that I made that I had even told them, your next grade is based on you paying attention to this feedback. That blew my mind. I at least assume that when you do that and you give the student back the paper and you write stuff on it, that they at least pay attention to that. And that was something that was new to me. Disadvantages, students need an account, and this does cost. It is really hard to find the actual cost of this. I think Turnitin.com, because they negotiate with districts, can't really find this out. So I think it's around about $2.50 per account that you have, and you have a limited number of accounts depending on how much you pay. Any questions about Turnitin? And so let's wrap up with today's meet. This is why I use today's meet. No username or password. I don't have to worry about students not remembering their login, not remembering what password they use. It is a massive increase in that substantive conversation, especially for my introverted students. I use a fishbowl type seminar in my AP class, usually at the end of the week, to try and wrap up the concepts, find out understanding, find out misconceptions, gaps in that understanding, have them learn from each other. And so with the fishbowl, it's about 8 students that are in the middle of the room discussing the issue. Our next one's going to be, what should the U.S. policy be with respect to fossil fuels? The rest of the students are at on the outside of the room, on a computer, on today's meet, and usually their directions are different than the students in the middle. They are listening to what the students are discussing in the middle as far as policy solutions, how to implement them, but their task is to try and troubleshoot. What difficulties do you see with these ideas that are being expressed? And they're typing it out on today's meet, where I am listening to the oral part. At the end of the class, I can go in and print a transcript of what was happening online. And it is powerful to see 25 kids engaged in a topic, discussing it. And so that is what I love about it. I also have these students that will tell me, I will not participate if you put me in the middle of the room. But online, they're going to type stuff in. And to get buy-in from those students is a powerful piece. The disadvantage, most of this was just trial and error. I'd be listening to the oral part and hear giggling on the outside, and all right, just set up those expectations. If you post anything that will distract from the conversation, I'm going to deduct points. And also, you saw, for those of you that logged in, you have to create a nickname. Make sure you can identify the students based on the nickname. And I tell them that they get a grade for the seminar, and I have to know who you are to be able to give you the points. So those are just some thoughts if you haven't used this before and are thinking about doing it. And since I only have 2 minutes left, let's just go to this last one. Let's go back into Google or today's meet, but I want you to share orally at your tables And so the prompt is posted on today's meet. But what is the biggest takeaway? How do you think you might use some of this stuff in your classroom? And again, I'm hoping that we can learn from each other, that I can go and look at this transcript and get ideas of how I might be able to add stuff to the technology pieces that I shared that I'm already using. So spend the last 2 minutes. Share orally in your groups. What might you do? How might you use this? And then please post that stuff on today's meet so that everybody can use this after this session is over. Yeah. I'll have students that will type that. I'll save the transcript as a PDF and then probably just email it you, and then that way, yeah. Thanks. All right, looks like my time is up. Any last questions that anybody might have about some of the pieces? I'm going to print out the transcript. I'll just save it as a PDF and send it to Rob. He can email it out to everybody. So if there was something that popped up on there that you didn't get a chance to read, then if you want to look over that later, it might give you some ideas of ways to use this in your classroom.
Any other questions for Brant?
Thanks.